welcome to another tremendous installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Wednesday, April 1st. Yesterday on the Cow Pies Morning Show, Ogden Driscoll, Ol' Augie, made an appearance. Out of the roughly 30-minute appearance on Jeff Rickett's show, Jeff is filling in for Jake in the Cow Pie, Augie was able to utter just about every single possible thing that could ever be untrue about the 2026 legislative session. I would suggest that you go and watch it, but there again, I wouldn't want to subject you to the misery of having to sit through 30 minutes of Ogden Driscoll. My guess is he mistook March 31st for today, April 1st. That had to be the case because he made the absurd claim that during the budget negotiations, it was the Wyoming Senate who was $100 million below what the governor had requested when they went into the Joint Conference Committee, and that he alone was responsible for how the budget turned out. Now, while there is a plethora of falsehoods that came out of that interview in the Cow Pie, the one that I just mentioned, that the Senate was $100 million below what the governor wanted, no doubt channeling Dr. Evil while saying it, that one is untrue on its face. The truth is, going into budget negotiations with the House of Representatives, the Senate's position was $1 million over what the governor had requested. It was the House of Representatives that sat at $170 million below the governor's request. It was not the Senate, and it certainly was not anywhere close to the number that dribbled out of Ogden's mouth. But that's just one example of the bullcrap that Ogden was spewing yesterday on that show. He did, however, say one thing that is absolutely true.
Yeah. And there's still stinks to high hell. I'm sure I'll get written up in the open range again, but...
That's it, right there. That is about the only true thing that Ogden Driscoll said during that entire interview. And you know what, Ogden? You're right. You probably are going to have another article written about you in the Open Range Record. I may write it myself. Well, here's a little bit more of what Augie had to say. You're going to love this next part.
For Bechtel to own a media outlet and to blatantly not lay the story out. And
first, Augie, Rebecca owns half, that is 50%. I know you have a problem with math, but it's 50% of the Open Range Record. You know who owns the other half of it? I do. But there again, it's Ogden Driscoll, and he really wouldn't know the truth if it smacked him upside the head. As to the other part of what Ogden Driscoll said, quote, blatantly not lay the story out, end quote. Now, Ogden, what exactly about the reporting from the Open Range Record is not true? Don't just say it in the Cow Pie. Prove to me that we printed something that is not true, and I will gladly print a retraction for you. Well, he won't, and he can't, because there's nothing about our reporting from the check incident that is not true. The only part that Ogden Driscoll disagrees with is the political finding from the House of Representatives that said, quote, there was no legislative misconduct. That doesn't mean that Carly Provenza and Mike Yin didn't violate House rules. It doesn't matter that they completely disregarded them. The political finding from a legislative body does not establish fact. That's their opinion. And frankly, when you look at the facts of what happened, it's an absolutely incorrect one. Anyway, I'm not going to rehash all of the check incident. We've done enough of that. But Augie, you are absolutely welcome to come on Cowboy State Politics and prove to me where our reporting is wrong. Oh, and fair warning, Ogden, we'll probably end up talking about all of the other things that you said on the Cow Pie that don't have a shred of reality to them. But you've got my number, Augie. Call me. Now, for the rest of today's program, I came across a fascinating article last night while I was doing show prep, and I talked about it on this morning's live program. Here it is. I've got a story that you may not even be aware of, Ken.
Gee, I hope not.
Well, I mean, this one is, I don't know, it's interesting. I found it last night. But the title of this piece is The Freedom Caucus Unveils Plan to Create Unity Inside a Fractured Party. And this comes from both the National Freedom Caucus and the State Freedom Caucus. But let me just read you the opening paragraphs here. In a bold and deeply clarifying move to address what experts are calling the most Wyoming problem imaginable, the House Freedom Caucus announced this week that it will now accept all Republicans into its ranks. No questions asked, no ideological tests required, and most importantly, no paperwork that might accidentally reveal who someone actually is. The decision comes after years of growing confusion among Wyoming voters, many of whom recently discovered that a surprising number of their Republican neighbors are, in fact, Democrats or independents, or possibly just people who wanted to vote in the primary and found that their registration form could be emotionally flexible. It's not deception, explained one longtime voter while carefully not making eye contact. It's strategic enthusiasm for procedural access. Political scientists have struggled to categorize this phenomenon with early theories including reverse partisan osmosis, ballot-based identity fluidity, and the more widely accepted, well, it's Wyoming. The issue came to a head when several candidates began noticing that their most enthusiastic Republican supporters were also attending Democratic fundraisers, volunteering for opposing campaigns, and occasionally arguing with themselves in public comment sections. Now, of course, this is referring to all of the debates on Facebook that you see surrounding anything to do with the Freedom Caucus. Now, faced with this existential blur, the House Freedom Caucus opted for a solution rooted in simplicity. Just eliminate the distinction entirely. Quote, if everyone is a Republican, then no one is secretly a Democrat pretending to be a Republican, said Rachel Rodriguez Williams, the chairwoman of the House Freedom Caucus, in unveiling the new membership policy titled Operation Big Tent, or as John Baer, former chairman emeritus of the Freedom Caucus, called it, no, seriously, everybody get in here. Transparency has been achieved. Now, under the new rules...
Yes, I like your plan, except it sucks, so let me do the plan, and that way it might be really good.
Under the new rules, membership in the House Freedom Caucus is automatic upon registration as a Republican. And this was done because everybody who even aligns with the House Freedom Caucus is accused of being a member of the Freedom Caucus. The most recent example of this is Ogden Driscoll debasing himself on the cow pie yesterday. You know, I mean, everything that guy said is, I mean, he mistook yesterday for today being April Fool's Day, because the only thing that he got right is that he is going to get another article on the Open Range Record. But anyway, the move by the Freedom Caucus is being done to just eliminate that problem of people hiding in the Republican Party. Let's see here. So under the new rules, membership in the Freedom Caucus is automatic upon registration as a Republican. Suspected registration as a Republican or, quote, having Republican adjacent vibes. A forthcoming amendment may extend eligibility to anyone who ever said, well, I'm fiscally conservative, but, before taking off to the ambiguity. Now, to help voters along with this transition, the Secretary of State will distribute updated guides clarifying that, quote, all Republicans are now members of the Freedom Caucus. Now, and also that some Democrats are Republicans and some Republicans are Democrats. Now, Ogden Driscoll yesterday on the cow pie in an interview, and in an effort to maintain his very last shred of credibility, encouraged everyone to remain calm and continue voting as if all of this makes sense. Freedom Caucus member Ken Pendergraft raised concerns that the policy could dilute the caucus's ideological identity. However, fellow caucus member Steve Johnson countered that this presumes that such an identity is still identifiable to begin with. Meanwhile, voters have expressed cautious optimism. Quote, I used to worry about who I really was, said one Sheridan resident. Now I don't have to. They're all in the same group. It's very comforting. Like a political lost and found, but nobody really ever picks anything up. Now, jokingly, Governor Mark Gordon sent out an email, as he often does in political fashion, stating that he was considering additional reforms to the Freedom Caucus plan, including a universal ballot labeled simply Yes, no, or depends on who's asking. And a pilot program allowing voters to just register as, well, just surprise me. Rachel Rodriguez Williams, chairman of the caucus and now candidate for Secretary of State, brushed aside the criticism by pointing out that Gordon himself will benefit from the new policy, adding that they are proud to have restored clarity to Wyoming politics. From this day forward, Rodriguez Williams concluded, there will be no confusion about who belongs, because everyone does. Now, the policy shift has also given rise to an unexpected demographic. Recovering Democrats, individuals who are now registered Republicans but can no longer recall the exact sequence of events that led them there. Support groups have begun forming quietly across the state, often in community centers, coffee shops, and in at least one case, the seasonal aisle of the hardware store. Meetings typically begin with a simple introduction. Hi, my name is Steve, and I think I switched parties in 2018 when it became politically convenient to vote for Cheney. Or maybe I just checked a different box. I'm not entirely sure anymore. Participants described a shared experience of gradual political amnesia. It often starts with a primary election, then a form, then a fleeting thought. Maybe I'll switch back later. Months pass and then years, and at some point they find themselves passionately defending positions they vaguely remember disagreeing with while still subscribing to newsletters that suggest otherwise. It's not that my beliefs have changed, said one voter. It's just that my registration got ahead of me. Now, see, Ken, this is a big problem in Wyoming, and it has been for a really long time, that Democrats register as Republicans and then hang out in the Republican Party. So I'm glad that you guys have come up with a plan to eliminate that problem.
Oh, come and see the violence inherent in the system! Help, help, I'm being repressed!
Help,
Bloody
you're being
peasant.
repressed.
That's about 5-6 minutes of my life I'll never get back.
Wait, there's more. It's not that my beliefs have changed, said one voter. It's just my registration got ahead of me. Now, to assist these individuals, Freedom Caucus State Director Jesse Rubino has introduced a new Partisan Memory Recovery Packet. It's going to include a timeline of major elections that a member may or may not remember voting in, a checklist entitled, Did I Really Mean to Do This? And a flowchart that begins with, Do you feel confused? And ends invariably with, You are currently a Republican. Now, the House Freedom Caucus has welcomed recovering Democrats with open arms, noting that their presence further reinforces the group's commitment to inclusivity and in distinction. Now, we don't ask where you came from, said State Freedom Caucus President Adam Roth, mostly because it becomes clear that nobody really knows. In fact, recovering Democrats have quickly become some of the caucus's most active members, often bringing a unique perspective shaped by their uncertain pasts. Quote, they ask a lot of questions, Representative Scott Smith noted, sometimes about policy, sometimes about themselves. To accommodate this, caucus meetings now include a brief segment entitled, Why Am I Here? During which members are encouraged to reflect, speculate, and if necessary, all shrug collectively. Now, despite the confusion, many recovering Democrats report a sense of peace. There's something freeing about it, newly minted member Bob Nicholas said. I used to worry about labels. Now, I just accept who I am. Maybe the form says who I am. Experts suggest that the phenomenon may represent a new phase in political identity, one less about ideology and more about administrative momentum. As Wyoming continues to redefine its approach to transparency, officials are optimistic that eventually the system will reach its logical conclusion, a fully unified electorate where party affiliation is both universal and entirely incidental. Until then, recovering Democrats will continue their journey not towards one party or another, but toward the faint, distant memory of having once made a deliberate choice. Now, Ken, I have to tell you, I find this plan enthralling.
Are you through yet?
No, I'm actually not. But you have to admit, one of the biggest problems in Wyoming politics is Democrats who claim to be Republicans.
Or opinionists who fabricate things.
Now, in a final twist that left even the most seasoned observers blinking slowly into the middle distance, sources now suggest that the entire phenomenon, cross-registrations, recovering Democrats, and the great Wyoming identity blur, may not have been accidental at all. According to his statement, that was neither confirmed nor denied, but strongly implied through a series of meaningful pauses, the effort was, in fact, orchestrated from the beginning by the Freedom Caucus itself. The objective? Radical transparency, or more specifically, a long-form, multi-year experiment designed to expose what insiders describe as the ultimate political truth hiding in plain sight. That truth, the statement suggests, is that Ogden Driscoll, Bo Beitman, and Tara Nethercott were, all along, Democrats. The room reportedly fell silent when the conclusion was unveiled, followed by the sound of several people rechecking their own voter registrations just to be safe. Quote, "We had to create a system so thoroughly confusing," said Freedom Caucus Chairman Emeritus John Baer, "that the only thing left standing would be the truth, or at least a truth, preferably our truth." That the strategy, dubbed Operation Reflective Prairie, relied on a simple premise, that even if enough people switched parties, forgot why, and joined the same group anyway, eventually that distinction between Republican and Democrat would collapse inward, revealing, at its core, whoever the caucus needed it to reveal. Critics have called the plan needlessly elaborate, philosophically unsettling, and possibly just a very long joke. But caucus members remain confident in the outcome. Quote, "You can't argue with results," said Baer, as he often does. "We set out to eliminate confusion, and no one knows anything." That's real clarity. As for those named in the revelation, responses have ranged from polite disagreement to extended pizza parties in Beitman's office. Meanwhile, recovering Democrats have expressed a renewed sense of purpose, relieved to discover that their confusion may have been part of something larger all along, or at least adjacent to it. State officials are now considering whether to formally recognize the entire episode as either a political innovation or a weather event. For now, Wyoming voters are left to navigate a landscape where everyone belongs, no one is entirely sure why, and the truth, whatever that may be, has been successfully brought to the surface, examined, and gently set back down, somewhere slightly different. In the end, the House Freedom Caucus stands vindicated, having proven once and for all that in modern politics, identity is fluid, affiliation is optional, and reality itself is, at best, not what the voter registration says it is. Well, there's your news from the Freedom Caucus this morning. See, there. I claimed that it was news. Let's take a break, and we'll be back in a minute. Happy April Fool's Day, and don't have too much fun. For now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is the one and only Cowboy State Politics. Have a good afternoon, my friends.